All right, so I'm going to be giving you guys a little bit of an overview on how our schedule works. We get a lot of questions this time of year as to how we prepare our master schedule and all the different pieces that go into it. And as you might imagine, there are a lot of things that come out of the schedule with staffing, with classes, class size, with programs that we offer, lots of different things. So we're going to just kind of do like a high-level overview for board members as you're going into the budget season so that you'll feel better equipped and you'll also hopefully have better questions to ask along the way because it is a pretty involved process. I do have my other team, my other administrators are back here also who can answer questions for the public. I'm just going to point them out. If you could just give a wave. Bob Dawson is here, the man in purple, and Heidi Levitt. And I also have my administrative intern, Michelle Worth, who's attending this evening, and she's doing a year-long internship with me through SANU, and that's giving her a lot of opportunity to learn things as well. Okay, different things that have come up. I've been doing this now for 13 years, so we get lots of different questions, right? What's the schedule look like? What are our graduation requirements? How does this compare to the state's minimum standards for school approval, which for those in the audience is a law that the state has that says at a minimum, these are the things that you must offer in order for a high school to be considered a high school. How do teacher certifications impact scheduling? What does the entire process of building a schedule look like? And what does the data tell us about some of our different student needs and our staffing levels? So I'm going to try to touch upon some of these throughout the next few minutes. So I start by saying when we think about building a master schedule, there's this inclination to want to try to keep things really simple just for purposes of trying to make decisions or make predictions about the future, right? So this is what you might be tempted to do when you oversimplify a situation. So I did a little math here and I said, well, we have 43 and a half teaching positions in our school, not counting our special education case managers and guidance counselors. These are just all of our classroom teachers, right? And all of our teachers teach 6 different sections of courses. So that would give us 261 courses that we could potentially offer, right? We have 672 kids here, according to our October 1st enrollment. And our kids, we have a schedule that has them taking 8 different classes. So this would be 5,376 different course seats that are needed. These are places where kids would have to go. If we divide by one by the other, we get a class size of 21, right? So that's oversimplifying, because when you look at our class size report, you don't see all of our classes having 21 kids, right? You see some have more, some have less, some have a lot less, some have a lot more, and we also have kids going other places too, not just some of these different seats. So we got to expand the problem, and I'm a math guy. I love to keep it simple and keep it numbers based, so we can't always do that. So the history of our schedule, when I started here 13 years ago, we had a 4x4 block. That meant that our kids took 4 90-minute classes in semester 1 and 4 90-minute classes in semester 2. We then made a modification and we created a couple of what we called skinny classes in the middle of the day. And there were lots of pros and cons to that schedule. By and large, people didn't like it. And the school board actually directed me, maybe 9 years ago, to do a study of our schedule and come up with a better option that was going to meet our needs. So we did. And this study took a couple of years, actually, by the time we reviewed what we wanted and came up with a better plan. But what folks from this school system wanted for a schedule were classes that were closer to 60 minutes in length, year-long. They wanted the ability for teachers to have collaborative planning time, and they wanted a flexible period built into the school day. So these are all things that we took under advisement when we built what we now have, which is our 6-day schedule. So you can't see all of the details there, and you don't need to see all the details. But what I want to point out is we have a schedule that has 3 different rotations in it, okay? We have a morning rotation that happens from about 7:30 to 9 o'clock. We have a middle of the day rotation from 9 to 11:30, roughly, and we have an afternoon rotation that happens from 12 o'clock on. Now, why do we have all these rotations, right? Well, remember, our schedule is dependent upon the fact that we have kids here with us all the time. We also have kids that leave us and go to SST, right? That's a fixed thing that has to happen. So in the middle of the day, we have a group of students going to SST for programming. At the end of the day, we have kids going to SST. So having these little mini rotations just means that we won't schedule a kid for the middle sex courses or the PM courses, right? So I'll dive into that a little bit more. But what you need to know for now is that our schedule is still based on kids taking 8 different classes, just like it was 13 years ago when we had a 4x4 block. All right? So I've asked some of our staff, well, what do we like about this schedule, right? I told you that we moved to this schedule after a lot of research, right? So here are just a few things that they came up with. And I'll elaborate on some of these. So our schedule allows us to do teaming in 9th and 10th grade. It provides us that optimal period of 60 and 80-minute classes, mostly 60. We have a few 80s in there. And that, by and large, is just the right length of time that folks are looking for. We have that flexible period embedded. I talked about that. We also embed an advisory period, which is an opportunity for kids to get college and career counseling, etc. Our SST kids can be accommodated. I talked about that. I'm gonna dive in a little bit and talk about how we have planning periods for teams and professional learning community periods for teams. And this waterfall schedule, that's this idea that we have a schedule where not all of our classes meet every day. Like, let me go back. You see how on the first day you can count 5 periods and an advisory period, right? Every day there's only 5 periods. And so we can get like 5 60-minute classes there, and that fills up our day. If we had a 7-period day, all the classes would be a little shorter. 8-period day, they'd be even shorter. You get the idea, right? All right. So we have small learning communities. These are our teams, and we have had these for quite some time. So we have a freshman learning community. That means all of our students, so think teams, I guess I'm talking to everybody here. Think teams like you would in a middle school, right? So our freshmen come in here. They have a team, blue or gray. They have their math, English, social studies, and science class on the team. In the sophomore year, we have something very similar. They have their English, social studies, and science classes as part of that team. They also do what's called a SIP, which is a student interest project. Is it period? Project, thank you. This is rebranding year, so I'm trying to make sure I'm using the new lingo. That's an opportunity for our kids to explore something that they're really passionate about that's of special interest to them. So we have time built in there for that. So you see at the bottom, our high school, actually our school board, won an award in 2012 for this freshman learning community model. Now, why was that? They won this from the National School Boards Association. So here's what they actually won. I went back to the application and I pulled out some data. So the whole purpose of creating the freshman learning community was to better get to know kids, to have a group of adults that are tracking and working with a group of kids for the entire year. They're focused on transition. They're focused on integrating the different experiences that kids have here. So remember, they come from 2 different feeder schools, right? We have Ellis students. We have Sanborn Middle School students. So we have some data tracked. I'm missing a couple of boxes. They weren't part of the grant applications. I don't have that data that I can give you. But if we go all the way back to the 07-08 year, we didn't have any teaming here, right? So in the 08-09 year, all the way to the 10-11 year, we were piloting some version of the teaming model. It wasn't full-blown. It didn't become full-blown until, the 11-12 year was the official first year that we had it. So the kind of data we tracked in that application were the number of 9th grade discipline referrals. Overall, how many times did a 9th grader get reported to the office for a discipline issue that the teacher wasn't able to resolve at their level. The other piece of data that was being tracked was the number of students who failed a course, freshmen. Not the number of course failures, but it says that, but it's the number of individual students that failed a course. You would know, I mean, logic would tell you, as it would tell me, if freshmen fail a course, statistically, they're far more likely to have issues later on in high school, right? So you can see the numbers declining considerably as we move from having no teaming to a point where we have full teams. I will tell you, and anybody who's been here at Sanborn long enough, the advent of teams almost transformed our culture overnight to one that was much more sustainable, focused on student learning, and focused on individual student needs. And you can ask any teacher, any student, anybody who was here then, and they will tell you the stark difference between what our school looked like before and what it looks like now with some of those metrics. All right, so getting back to our schedule here, this just highlighting so that you can see when our kids are actually going to SST. So in pink, those are the times when our mid-session kids are not here. So a mid-session kid would be a first-year SST student, mostly juniors with a few sophomores, about 70 students, plus or minus. In the afternoon, the green, those are our PM SST students, second-year students, mostly seniors, some juniors, about 35 to 40 kids are doing that. They take buses, they come back. I'm only showing you, by the way, one version of this schedule. There are 2 lunches. I'm showing you, you don't need to see both to get the idea of how the schedule works, but there is another lunch period that sits right above, 1 row up. All right, so some of our kids, it matters whether you're on the first floor or the second floor when you have class. That tells you which lunch you have. But you get the point. You can see how our schedule sets up. So what does this mean for our teachers? Because we were talking about kids. Kids take 8 classes. So our teachers, by contract, they have to have a 30-minute duty-free lunch, bell to bell. All right, 30 minutes. The other thing is they need 5 uninterrupted preparation periods equal to a regular class period. That's language that comes right out of their contract. So what that tells us is, okay, they need lunch, we get it. They need to have not a prep period every day necessarily, but in a week, they've got to have 5 in a week, right? Or we work on a 6-day cycle, so we ensure that they're going to have 6 periods in a 6-day cycle, all right? So when we were a block schedule, it was very easy. Teachers taught 3 classes, and they had 1 as a prep period. The next semester, they taught 3 classes, they had 1 as a prep period. Now it's a little bit more complicated because you can see we got classes coming in and out, in and out. So our teachers teach 6 classes. They have always taught 6 classes. This is in addition to the work that they do with FLT and advisory, which I can talk about separately. So those 6 classes could be any different combination, right? So I'm going to show you a combination here that some of our teachers have. So some of our teachers are in a setup where they don't teach periods 3 and 4. So their 6 classes would be 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8. Everybody with me? So what happens periods 3 and 4, those would be their off periods. So if you look at their schedule, every single day, 3 or 4 shows up at least once. Twice in a 6-day cycle, it shows up twice. So what we do is we tell the teachers, you have your individual planning period during, well, in this case, the 9:30 to 10:30 slot. And on the 10:30 to 11:30 slot, on those A and D days, we are requiring that you meet with your team for what we call a professional learning community team experience, all right? Think of it, school board members, like subcommittee meetings. All the work that you need to do as a school board cannot happen at this table. You have these very extensive subcommittee meetings, right? Well, our PLC meetings operate very much like that. We can't get everything done in a staff meeting, but boy, oh boy, do we get a lot done in these PLC meetings. So the nice thing, the beauty of this, and this is what makes Mrs. Levitt a rock star, is she is able to coordinate so that if you are part of a team, you have the same 2 periods off, or you have at least one of the 2 periods off. You are always able to meet during these yellow times. And there are lots of different combinations, all right? Here's another example where teachers have 4 and 6 off, and they're able to meet. But I probably should have picked different ones. If you pick 7 and 8, you would have double periods on B day and E day. That's what our freshmen do, right? So every one of our 7 teams has a combination that works. And this is what allows us to have that planning time, but also that bonus time that we can control, that's very scripted, that's focused on very specific work around student achievement. And we have made lots and lots of progress with our collaborative team effort. All right, so I did a little survey, some of the schools around us, because I was curious, well, what do their teaching schedules look like? All right, so what you're seeing here is, I explained Sanborn. We have a student schedule where kids have 8 classes. We have a teacher schedule where they teach 6 out of 8. So here's some other combinations, and I literally just, all the principals, we meet fairly regularly. We were at an SST meeting, and I just had them go right around the room and tell me exactly what their schedules were, and then I made a couple phone calls to the ones who weren't there. So you can see some different combinations. You know, Timberlane, for example, 8 and 5, Wyndham 8 and 5. Winnicott has kind of a weird trimester thing going, but what it works out to is a 7-period day, teachers teaching 4. So that just gives you some context for how much time our teachers are spending in the classroom as compared to what that might look like at other schools. Now that, mind you, does not take into consideration almost all of these schools listed have some form of an advisory or focused learning time period. So let me, because I don't think I put a slide in here, let me just say something about this. So let me back up. Advisory, us old school people would call this homeroom. Well, it's homeroom on steroids. Okay, we do a lot more than just what you and I may have done in homeroom. But we do that twice a week on A days and D days. On the other days, we give students the opportunity to sign up, or we also give teachers the opportunity to sign students up to get some reteaching, intervention, and enrichment. So this is what they need, when they need it, and it changes on an ongoing basis, right? If you're at work, you're working on a special project, and you know that for the next couple of weeks, you're going to need a little extra time to work on that project, you make adjustments in your schedule, right? So we're trying to teach our kids to do some of those same exact things. All right, so let's talk about graduation requirements for a second. I know this is a ton of info, and I apologize for that, but board members, I hope this is helping you get a better picture of things here. And also, many of you here that maybe don't know. Maybe your kids aren't at high school yet, or maybe they are, and you didn't know all these pieces were there. So for many, many, many moons here at Sanborn, we had one diploma. It was called the Sanborn Diploma. It was a 28-credit diploma. Some time ago, I want to say 4 or 5 years, I don't know, I need a historian on this one, we were looking to add the minimum standards diploma. Sandy, do you remember? You're shaking your head, maybe. 5 years ago-ish? I don't remember. So the 20-credit diploma is the state's minimum standards diploma. Remember I said there's a law where the state will tell you, at a minimum, you have to do these things. You can go above and beyond that if you want, but at a minimum, you do this. So we wanted to get that 20-credit diploma in. As we were working through policy, I don't remember which board member it was, but a board member made a motion to say, I'm only going to be in favor of this if we also add a 32-credit diploma. We have a lot of kids who are going above and beyond the 28-credit. Why would we not be recognizing it? We thought it was a great idea. We put it in place, and we started doing it. So over the last 3 years, I just want to give you a sense of how many of our kids have been getting which diploma options. So again, you can't read all these numbers. I'll help you out with them. So roughly 51 to 52% of our kids get the standard 28-credit diploma, okay? And this is over the last 3 years. We're ranging between 40 and 42% of our kids are getting that diploma with distinction. Very consistent over the last 3 years. Between 1 and 3% take the GED, which we now call the high set, same thing, all right? We average between 3 and 4% that apply for and are allowed to do the 20-credit diploma. That is not an automatic. Kids can't just say, I'm going to go for that. That's good enough for me. It's a very rigorous process to be accepted into that minimum standards diploma, and you have to have some very extenuating circumstances for it. We've done a good job kind of keeping that to about what we would expect for that. And then we have another 1 or 2% that pursue the adult education diploma. We do not offer, so they do that at Exeter Adult Ed, and that is usually at school district expense. Sometimes they do it at their own expense. There are some determining factors for that, all right? So if you're curious what the graduation requirements look like, I'm not going to read all these off, but know that 28 credits gets broken out into various subjects, okay? So if you looked all the way over at the right, that's, you know, the Granite State of New Hampshire telling you, you at least need this, and you can work your way left and see how we expanded upon those minimum standards for the 28 and the 32 credit diplomas, okay? So I'm assuming for the public, we'll make this slide these slides available, yes, to them later? In case they want to, okay, perfect. So I'm not going to read this, but again, I said there's a law. It tells you at a minimum what schools have to look like. It's 104 pages long by last count. Very lengthy document. But it is designed for schools to use if they're looking at making changes to what they do, to make sure that they're still within compliance of that. Another thing that comes into play at all levels, definitely has some curveballs here at the high school, is teacher certification, all right? I'm certified as a math teacher. I am. That's what I used to do before I taught. I don't have any business teaching an English class. You don't want me teaching an English class. I can't teach an English class, all right? The same way that if you're having a heart issue, I hope you're not going to a foot doctor. I mean, you might get an opinion, but I don't know if you want to trust that opinion. So we have some general certifications. Okay, I see Dr. Conan in the room. He's a math teacher. He can teach any of the math courses that we have here. However, if Dr. Conant was a science teacher, I would have to ask, what is your science certification? Because there's a difference between earth and space science, biology, life sciences, chemistry. Those are different certifications, and you can't always just go from one to the other, all right? That's a whole, you can't read that, and I'm not expecting you to, but those are all the different certifications that the state of New Hampshire offers right now. There's a lot of them, okay? And a lot of our teachers have multiple certifications, which is fantastic. And a lot of teachers, at their own expense, at our request, have pursued additional certifications, which gives us flexibility to use them differently and to help make adjustments with our schedule. So to think about our scheduling process, all right, I want you to think about this visual. If you were to look at a map, and this is the New York City subway system, it's a beautiful looking map. Everything seems very well laid out, well thought out, color-coded. What you don't know is that underneath that map is a very organized, systematic process that you don't always see. And our master schedule is the same way. It looks very nice and neat and packaged and organized at the front, but when you dive underneath that, it's very complex, and there are lots of different layers working together to make this work for our kids. So when Mrs. Mosley, you're right there. Look at that. So what does our process look like at our school, right? So we always put students at the center. That's what we're here for, right? So we build our schedule based on what we know our kids need and also what our kids want. So that's not to say that in 1 year we make drastic changes to our staffing, because I will tell you, I've been here 13 years. Our student interests don't change overnight drastically. They do, however, evolve over time, and we evolve with them, all right? So scheduling is an all-year process, literally all year. So it's part of Heidi's job description, and she literally tackles different jobs over the course of that year. So it starts in the fall. with us doing surveys for students and teachers trying to figure out, what our needs are, what student interests are going to be. Right around December, we build what we call the Program of Studies, which has all of our different course options. Then in January and February, students are allowed to make their course requests. After they do that in March, we figure out how many sections of all the courses we're going to need. And we make an early decision on what courses we're going to run, what courses we're not. April and May, that's where we start building the actual schedule, right? So there'll actually be a chart with every teacher, every period. We start plugging courses in. Some of this is done by hand. There are things that we know. We know when the AP or dual enrollment classes have to be so they don't conflict, or we minimize the conflicts. Band, band and chorus, the number one classes that we schedule, right? Making sure that we can maximize kids in those. Other classes, we do our teaming classes because those are predictable. We know where they're going to be. And then we do use our system, our student information system, to automate some of our scheduling. So once we've done those high priority courses, we let the scheduling software put all the electives where it thinks they're going to fit best to give us our highest percentage of students getting scheduled for those particular courses, right? And then in June through September, Heidi's printing schedules for kids. Students are seeing their schedules, making adjustments maybe, either because they've changed their mind, because, I don't know, they're kids, and they change their mind 1,000 times. But more importantly, because maybe they weren't successful in a class and needed to do something different. Maybe they found out they got approved for SST or an internship, and so they need to do something different. Or they just want to do something different. So there's a lot of schedule changes that happen throughout the summer and into the early part of September. So a year-long process. I'm almost done, I promise. I will tell you, though, that our schedule is making a big difference. Okay? We have two banners that hang in our foyer that we're very proud of, one from 1998, one from 2018. They come from the New Hampshire Excellence in Education Committee. That's a group that solicits applications from schools all over the state using a rubric, brings schools in for an interview, eventually picks a few schools to come out and do site visits for, and picks one school that they think is a model for other schools to look to for a variety of reasons. And I tell you that our schedule, our teaming, these are reasons that we've won this award now twice. We've won the Magna Award, which I talked about. We won, as a district, the Nellie May Award. All of these things came from folks looking at how we are utilizing our resources in making student-centered decisions. I talked about our schedule, but let's also remind ourselves, not only do we have physical courses that our kids take, there are lots of ways they can earn credits. We have 80 to 90, Heidi, help me, kids doing extended learning opportunities with people in our community. So they're going out to a business, they're going out to an elementary school, they're going, maybe they're doing one here in our building with somebody. They're learning on the job, and these are all different kinds of projects of their choosing that they're doing. And we have staff members that help manage that. It's a monumental task, but a very meaningful one. Mr. Ambrose talked about how he's hopeful, and I am hopeful too, that we can get plumbing and electrical and HVAC rolling at SST. Well, doesn't mean we're not offering those. Right now, we have a lot of people who work in those industries who are taking our kids in during the school day and working with them, and it's fantastic, and it's great learning for them. We have kids who take online classes, whether it's VLAX, which is the Virtual Learning Academy Charter School. Some may be doing it through a program that we have here in-house called Edgenuity. We have kids doing dual enrollment classes. In some cases, we have professors from colleges coming here to teach them. In other cases, we're vetting our teachers to teach them. So we have a wealth of courses that our kids can take, and probably lots of other examples that I could talk about, but I think I've already used way more than I should have of my time. Any questions that the board might have?
I've got a question.
Yes.
So, just to play devil's advocate for a moment,
Yes.
not every high-performing district offers the 32-unit diploma. They offer a diploma with fewer units, fewer credits.
Yep.
And I'm just wondering if we spread ourselves too thin sometimes. When we have so much quantity, are we sacrificing any quality when it comes to the diplomas? Just wondering that because we want to get our scores up, and I know Mr. Trammell's told us that universities are pulling a subset of courses taken from transcripts to look at a GPA based on those important courses. So I understand the importance of having choices on the schedule, but I'm just wondering if we're really benefiting from such a large number of electives, for example.
Yeah, I don't know that that's a question that I can answer from the podium, but again.
Let's bring it to the EISA then.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you raise a question that's worth looking at. I guess the answer I would go back to is the one thing that we've never changed since I've been here is the fact that we've made a decision that we want our kids to take 8 different experiences a year, right? So what that means is we've built all of our courses in our curriculum around that idea. So if we were going to move to a schedule where they took, let's say, 7 or 6 options a year, that is probably going to that's going to have some impact in how our math curriculum is set up, or our English curriculum, or the types of electives that we might offer. Absolutely. Yeah, am I to say is one better than another? I don't know. I pulled this slide back up just so that you can see it is a smattering. I don't see anybody offering 6, but 8s and 7s, I don't think there's rhyme or reason to say the high-performing ones are doing one or the other. I think it's a mixture. But I will always say I've always been a fan of the statement, it's not the time you have, it's how you use it, really. I really do feel like just trying to find ways to maximize how efficiently we can use that time is huge. And when we added that flexible time piece, that was a big push for our kids. We have kids doing all sorts of little projects and explorations during that time. These are things that aren't even classified necessarily as courses. And that student interest project, the SIP, right? You get that? Okay. Another opportunity where kids can explore a passion, and it isn't necessarily a course, which I think, Dr. Brown, has really helped us over time start to hone in some of the different courses we offer, right? Do we need a full course on skateboard building? No. But we probably have 1 or 2 kids as SIPs this year doing it, I'll bet. I don't know for sure, I'm guessing. So.
Can I just ask a quick, do you mind if just for the sake of time, because I think that I have some questions right now that I'd like to ask, but so for example, I would like to have a conversation where we just pop up the current student numbers on the board and talk about kind of how did that all work, because I've gotten some answers that I didn't have my first year here. So for example, the freshman learning community, when you look across it, there's probably 10 or 15 classes that are 10 or 11 kids right now in the master schedule, and other ones that are 24 or 25. So I went to Master Stack. Oh, God. It's not a rapper, I swear. I went to Mr. Stack and I said, about this master schedule, can you explain this to me? And he explained to me that the reason why it looks like that is because the freshman team regroups every, how many weeks?
The sophomores, so you're putting 2 things together. The freshmen, the reason it's so disjointed is they work in the bell schedule. Math is, there's honors options and not honors options for the freshman year, and math is on the team. So that's what creates all of the variability there. The sophomores is actually the truest example of a team we have, which is literally why the classes are identical. Donna teaches, because she's sitting here, she teaches a pod. She may have 60 kids in that pod. That's 3 classes, 20 kids in each, and they absolutely keep them even, and they will switch them a few times a year, just as they need to, change seats for kids like Adam who are going to be too chatty or something.
So what I'm proposing, Mr. Baker, if I may, I'm proposing that now that we've gotten an initial presentation, that you all email your questions to me.
Yeah.
I have 5 or 6 questions that I'm not going to ask right now, and then Brian will come back
Yeah, and I think
in 2 weeks.
right. I think
So I'd like the
that
questions in a week.
yeah.
So a week from today, if you could get the questions to me by next Wednesday, and then he can come back when I present the budget.
Right, because I think what our hope was is that
Right-
this
right
would
now,
provide
I
you
have one
context
question.
to ask.
Sure,
You
no
know?
problem.
Yeah,
Yep.
I just wanted you to have the context so that you would know
I mean, we could do the
what
reverse,
kinds of
Jim. It's up
questions
to-
to ask.
it's up to
You
the-
know?
You're going to be able to answer this easily.
All right.
New Hampshire Scholars, 24 credits, right?
New Hampshire Scholars is, help me out, Heidi, because there's more than one. New Hampshire Scholar requirements, credit requirements.
There are,
28.
I think it's 28, I'm not sure off the top of my head, I have to look at it. There's a couple of different Hampshire scholars as well, so you can
So when we see the row of students up at graduation that earned the New Hampshire Scholar, is that different credits for different kids, or is it a uniform amount? When we have, when we see at graduation, when the row of kids is up there getting the New Hampshire Scholar Award, are those kids getting awards on different levels of credits, numbers of credits, or are they all?
No, it's, they have to take 4 years of English, they have to take 3 years
Right.
of math, 2 foreign languages, and then there are different kinds of New Hampshire scholars, so there's a New Hampshire Scholars Tech and a New Hampshire Scholars Art.
I see.
So those might differentiate them. They can take a couple of different sciences, so there's a number of different lab sciences that qualify for the science requirement. So
Right.
it might be different within each student based on their choice,
Okay.
but the number of classes are the
Yeah,
same.
if you could just let us know what those credits are.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to show you, so another thing you may want to look at, this might help you as well. If you're on our high school website, on the left-hand side of the quick links is our program of studies. And when you open it, there's a little table of contents at the top, but it'll take you down to the New Hampshire Scholars, wherever it is. I won't pull it up now, but you can actually look at, because that will actually break out and show you what all of them are. Mr. Ambrose?
Thank you, Mr. Stack. I'm so glad when you acknowledge me. The national baseline for New Hampshire Scholars Program includes 4 years of English, 4 years of math to include Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2, laboratory science, 3 years of basic laboratory science to include biology, chemistry, and preferably physics, social studies, 3.5 years chosen from U.S. and world history, world geography, economics, and government, foreign language, 2 years of the same foreign language other than English. So basically, Jim, it's the old school, traditional college prep
Yeah,
curriculum.
so if someone could add up those credits for me at some point and let me know what that is?
I'll do it in 5 minutes, I'll send it to you.
Okay, all right. And then follow-up to that is, the difference between the 24 or whatever it is, the 28 and the 32, is that essentially electives?
It is essentially elective, so that is actually board policy.
And is there a minimum class size that you have when you offer electives?
We don't have a minimum class size when we offer, well, we're not going to run a class with only one kid in it, obviously. We're going to run classes based on the staffing that we have. There are some minimums that you should be aware of. So our shop classes have very strict minimums, and it's, I'm going to forget. What did I say, minimum? Oh, yeah. So they have, I'm sorry, that's the other half of the question that you're going to ask next. The shop classes have maximums, and it's like 15 students or 18 students, depending on if it's auto or welding or wood. I forget which ones are which. Science has a max of 24 for lab spaces. Those are two that come to mind. We don't have family and consumer science, but that also had one. As far as minimums go, to answer your question, Mr. Baker, there isn't a minimum per se. However, that being said, it's going to be based on what we have for staffing. We have a lot of classes that don't run. We have a lot of classes that will opt to run every other year, and we have some classes that we'll try to combine. Like if we have not enough kids to run this and this, but they're very similar topics, we may try to put them together. I say try because, I mean, really, we have to be sure that we have the right teachers with the right certifications and the kids want these in the right periods.
Thank you.
Can I have one comment, Dr. Brown, Chairman?
Mr. Mason?
In the event, because this conversation includes the parent guardians, and ultimately we are fiduciary agents, and we're working for them. Many community members are in the public this evening, who I'm assuming have their own questions. And because of the governance process, should we open up and, as the board, ask the superintendent to ask his leadership team to potentially open up a survey? If we're going to do it, maybe we should just do it as a united front survey of questions, so it can all be synthesized properly and so forth.
How about this? I'll put in my, I'll put a message, instead of doing a formal survey, I think what I'm gonna do with, what I would like to do with this one, Corey, I was just about to suggest this before we close this up, is to not only have the board send me questions by Wednesday, but anyone from the public too. So anyone here who has a question, who would like to ask a question, I'm certainly open to hearing that and try to get you an answer. And I'll also put a note on Facebook saying, hey, we had this great presentation about the high school, how the master schedule is created. I don't know that I want to get into I mean, I can create a little survey form that people can fill out and put their question in if I start getting overloaded, but the reality is that I'll think about it. That might be easier because it just makes it puts it into an Excel spreadsheet. But the reality is that, go ahead. Go ahead, Corey.
With all due respect, just timing-wise, like, community members will get this video on Thursday, Friday, maybe. There'll be a notification. I'm just concerned that all stakeholders won't be reached. And, there's obviously many mediums and many ways. It's totally up to you. I'm just, as a board member, suggesting it happens. I won't put a parameter time frame to it.
Thank you. I'll work with Mr. Stack to figure out how to get community input effectively.
Super, thank you.
So would you like to take public comments on this particular presentation right now before we take our 5-minute break?
I think we're going to have an hour with Mr. Trammell, and then we've got a lot more to do after that. If we
Okay,
could
because
have,
I know Mr. Stack's leaving.
Oh, no, I'm not leaving.
Oh, you're not?
you are
Okay.
staying?
I'm good. My flight,
I wasn't sure if
I
you were
was at a
leaving early.
conference. My flight was, all the flights to Boston were super delayed, but
Like a 5-minute.
I'm good, trust
Yep.
me.
So could we take a 5-minute break right now and then continue after that?
Thank you.
Thank you.